Welcome, everyone, to Sunday mornings at the Marxist Library. Happy Mother's Day to everybody. A quick note before we start, this session is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube with a link on our site, ICSSmarx.org, within the next couple of days. Before the pandemic, this weekly program was hosted at the Nebo Proctor Marxist Library located in Oakland, California, USA. During the pandemic, we've been meeting every Sunday morning on Zoom. We've been offering these Sunday morning programs for over a decade and a half now. You can sign up for email notifications for future programs, view past programs, and contact us through our website at ICSSmarx.org. And of course, we always welcome input, feedback, suggestions for topics, and speakers. My name is Alan Miller. I'm a member of the program committee that organizes a Sunday morning at the Marxist Library sessions. Before we start, we want to remind everybody that this is a comradely forum for political discourse and debate. As such, we ask that you show respect for our other participants and our moderator of today's session. Please note that the opinions expressed here are those of the speaker and participants. They do not necessarily represent the ICSS or the Marxist Library. Our session today is titled Artificial Intelligence versus the Working Class, and we're very happy to welcome back Jack Rasmus, who has been a frequent speaker at the library over many years, PhD in political economy, who teaches economics at St. Mary's College in California. He's also author of many books, the latest of which is The Scourge of Neoliberalism, U.S. Economic Policy from Reagan to Bush. To get more information about Jack, you can go to his website at jackrasmus.com. Our session today will go for approximately 1.5 hours. We'll go for about 45 minutes with a short break, followed by 45 minutes of a short break for announcements and 45 minutes of Q&A. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Rasmus. Professor Rasmus, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. By the way, just a correction that my latest book published in 2020 was Scourge of Neoliberalism from Reagan to Trump. So it covers the period up to 2019. I have another a project in progress here, picking it up from 2020. Called The Viral Economy and Its Aftermath, but that won't be published till later in the year. Okay, I guess I should just jump right into at this point. Okay, well, first of all, it's important to understand that under neoliberalism, which is late 70s until the present, which is a kind of restructuring of capitalism, U.S. capitalism, to restore global hegemony and domestic control after the crisis of the 70s. Neoliberalism, just very briefly, is a set of new policies, industrial policies, fiscal policies, monetary policies, trade policies that U.S. capitalism instituted and has refined over the decades here. This presentation is not necessarily about neoliberalism. I've given that before. You can check out on my blog, and a latest is upcoming for a French group called Perspective Livre. Anyway, but the point about neoliberalism is that in checking the working class and social movements, as well as neutralizing and reestablishing U.S. capital hegemony globally, it intensified exploitation of labor. That's a key element of neoliberalism's industrial policy, and it's been very successful in doing that. We've seen, of course, the destruction of union membership and the unions that remain, many of them engaged in decades of concession bargaining, and a lot of the gains of the previous period were lost as a result of concession bargaining. We've seen a lot of jobs, particularly in the goods sector, offshored. just since 2000, I think about 6 or 7 million manufacturing jobs alone have been offshored. That's been the result of favorable tax policies by the capitalist state to move jobs offshore, and then passing free trade deals so that they could expatriate the profits by moving the goods onshore when they're sold, for example. So offshoring and free trade go hand in hand. We've also seen the displacement of capital of labor by capital. All that has reduced high-paying wage jobs, as we know, significantly, and the vacuum's been filled with low-paying jobs. Service jobs of various kinds. And that has given rise to what's called the precarious jobs. That's a big change under neoliberal industrial policy, wage policy, ever since the 1980s. In the 1980s, we saw the surge of involuntary part-time jobs, and in the 90s, temp jobs. And then in the 2000s, we see the beginning of gig jobs. It's all related, you see. And each change in the labor market has intensified exploitation of labor in a number of ways. You can think of gig work as sort of precarious jobs on steroids, because the nature of gig work is the capitalist shift the cost of providing fixed capital and other forms of variable capital onto the backs of the workers. You got to provide your own job, your own car, and all the costs and so forth. That capital investment is no longer done by business themselves with gig work. The workers have to provide for it. So that's even further intensification of exploitation. And we've seen other changes that have occurred under neoliberalism in the labor markets. The privatization of pensions. We used to have good union pensions called defined pension plans, where you're guaranteed so much pension per month per year of service. That beginning with neoliberalism has been replaced by 401k plans, which are privatized individual plans, which the companies don't have any liability for anymore. We've seen the shifting of health costs onto the workers themselves, regardless of all these plans, ACA and so forth, privatization. The cost shifting has continued for quite some time. We've seen the intensification of wage theft in various forms, simply not paying workers for the hours of work, and other ways of taking back, companies take back the wage that they pay, or they don't pay the wage they're supposed to pay. That's in tens of billions of dollars a year. We've seen the atrophying of the minimum wage with sub-minimums for certain occupations and disabled. Social Security surplus has been stolen pretty much, borrowed by the government, the capitalist state. The Social Security reforms in 1986 created a $4 trillion surplus. That $4 trillion surplus has evaporated pretty much as the government has borrowed from the Social Security Trust Fund, and in 2008, 9, and in 2021, we saw the payroll tax holidays. So all of that has atrophied the Social Security surplus, which is kind of a deferred wage. Workers pay payroll tax into the trust fund, and then the government borrows it or allows companies not to pay their share of the payroll tax. So all of these are forms of exploitation, really, intensifying under neoliberalism. And we've seen also other ways of intensification. If you use the Marxist categories for exploitation of absolute surplus value exploitation, in other words, lengthening the workday, and relative surplus value, which is about intensifying productivity, what you see is under neoliberalism a sharp increase in this. For decades, we reduced the workday but ever since we have neoliberalism, I believe the workday has been expanding. More mandatory overtime has been a problem as companies have laid off high-paid workers. Commute time has extended. Paid leave has declined. Professionals, the more professional business jobs that you have, people are working all hours and on weekends. I mean, if you're in the tech industry, for example, even if you're not at senior levels, you're expected to work well more than 40 hours a week. You're on call, you're working all the time. Technology has enabled that. K through 12 teachers do not work 8-hour days. If there's anyone in your family, you know, they come home and they work in the evening preparing lesson plans and so forth. There's a trend of hiring now that's very intensifying, especially in tech, where students are work for free in these labs just to get exposure to jobs. In other words, no pay. Interns go in, student interns, and they work for summer and they work for free. And for tech jobs, increasingly, the people are interviewed and required to produce work as proof that they can do the job. And that management just keeps that. I mean, talk about, you know, no pay for hours of work, and that's spreading everywhere. And it's pretty widespread in tech, and it's, you know, in other areas where you have skilled work that's going on. Well, that's an intensification of the workday. Working from home now with COVID, that has dramatically impacted the labor markets. People work from home, and increasingly they're working more than the regular 8 hours, I believe, especially on weekends. And you find retired workers re-entering the workforce because Social Security and their pension is not enough. So all these forms of extending the workday, when you add them up, I think is an indication that marks this category of workday extension as a form of exploitation really holds under neoliberalism. And then, of course, we have relative surplus value, which is intensifying in traditional forms as well. If you look at productivity in the USA, from the middle of the 70s to about the crash in 2008-10, right? We had about a 75% increase in productivity, but only a 17% increase in the wages of non-supervisory production workers. So their productivity is massively increased, but they haven't shared in that productivity at all. In real wages, adjusted for inflation, there's been no gain in real wages since 1982. So workers aren't getting any benefit from productivity at all. There's no productivity sharing going on. And that's an example of intensification of what's going on, you know, in the traditional workforce. We've lost we had about 20 million manufacturing jobs at the beginning of neoliberalism. We got about 12 million now. So 8 million jobs have been eliminated just in manufacturing. I don't know what the number is in construction and in certain areas of the service sectors. Same thing going on, communications and transport and so forth. So the point is, under neoliberalism and its policy changes, we have an intensification in traditional ways of looking at exploitation of labor. Now, overlaid on this is the artificial intelligence revolution, which is a big thing. I mean, if you look back at the neoliberalism, you know, the creation of the precariat, contingent jobs, was a big labor market change that intensified exploitation. People working 2-3 jobs, you know, just as an aside, you know, a lot of the job recovery here or job numbers by the government, the employment situation report every month. If you dig down into it, a lot of it is the creation of part-time work and service in the services sectors. There is not full-time jobs being created. In fact, the numbers for full-time creation are down, while the total numbers for job creation are up. And that means you got a lot of part-time temp jobs being created. That's just an aside here. But if you look at the lack of productivity gains recently, productivity has been even though it increased 75% since the 70s, that rate of increase has dropped dramatically after the 2008-10 crash. The annual growth in productivity in the U.S. economy is not the long-term average of 1.5 to 2%, but barely 1%. And now, if you look at the last 2 years recovering, supposedly from COVID, there's a big crisis of productivity going on. We have the worst productivity numbers for the last 18 months ever in this country since the creation of those numbers in 1948. We've got 5 consecutive quarters of decline, first time that ever happened, and the longest period of decline in productivity. Now, when that happens, productivity declines, profits are impacted, right? And unit labor costs rise, and businesses pass, if they can, if they're monopolistic enough, they pass that on into inflation. They pass on their cost increase. And that's one of the reasons why I believe, just as a further aside, we've got chronic high inflation. We have high unit labor costs because productivity has collapsed. Unit labor costs are a function of productivity and wages. Wages aren't rising that much, only in certain occupations, but productivity is collapsing. 5 consecutive quarters. Last quarter, minus 2.7%, and productivity declined. Well, that means unit labor costs are rising rapidly, and companies are passing it on and will continue. What we've got in the AI, artificial intelligence revolution, is a massive shift towards creating productivity. Businesses see a massive productivity boom coming out of AI and saving this long-term collapse of productivity, or decline and now collapse of productivity going on in the U.S. economy. AI will impact the labor force even more seriously, I believe, than the precariat job shift, which, by the way, created about 50 million jobs. You got about 160 million job labor force in the U.S. At least 50 million of that is a part-time, involuntary part-time gig work, temp work, and so forth. In other words, mostly people who are working more than one job, because most of them are part-time, and extending their workday and getting paid less per hour with no benefits. All those gains are being pocketed by capital here. So the precariat shift under neoliberalism was very big and very important. And then we had the gig work, which is kind of, as I said, precariat work on steroids. But now coming in the wake of all that, we have artificial intelligence. And that will devastate the labor force even more, I believe, than even precariat work, reduced hours of work per worker, et cetera. Why? Well, basically, AI will eliminate simple decision-making jobs. In other words, jobs where it doesn't take a high level of skill to make a decision. A lot of those jobs will be service jobs. A lot of those will be the precariat jobs. In support of what I'm saying, we just had a report last week by Goldman Sachs research that says the impact of AI, the train of which has left the station now, it's been developing for at least a decade here. But with this creation of generative AI represented by ChatGPT, it's reached a qualitative shift now. The quantitative development of AI, new advances and new software, GPT 1, 2, and 3, and so forth, prior to GPT-4. With GPT-4, we have a qualitative leap now, and there is a big rush going on by businesses everywhere to implement AI in their businesses, because it means they can massively reduce labor costs. That's what it's really all about. And of course, substitute labor costs with software machines, intelligent software machines that actually will make these decisions. So think of AI as, at least in generative AI and natural language processing, which is the core of it right now in these advances, think of it as eliminating simple decision jobs and those occupations that are simple decision making. The most noted occupation that we hear talked about is customer service representatives. We've had bots for some time, right? You go online, you talk to somebody on a chat screen. GPT eliminates the human element in the chats. How is that any different than the chat boxes now? Well, a couple ways. One, it works 24/7. It's faster and more accurate than a human being. No one's going to say, well, let me check on that, and they put you on hold, the chat, and then they come back. Well, that's going to be gone. And all businesses have interfaces to their customers. So all businesses are going to implement chat GPT, who can afford it, right? Faster response, no training, no turnover of people. You don't have to pay these people on the chat screens, wages and benefits and so forth, right? That's one area, one occupation, and there's a lot of those. Another occupation that's up for decline is sales clerks, retail sales clerks, both online and to the extent that you go to a big box store in a mall or something like that. Searching online would be very personalized now, not based on keywords. When you go to Amazon, you type in something, right? You'll talk to a real, quote, AI person. Well, of course, it's not going to be a person. It's going to be a software machine you're talking to. But these machines now can speak to you in what's called natural language, which is English or German or whatever you're speaking to them, and they understand what you're saying in a very complex way, and they can respond not just by sending you to a database or something to get information, but actually have a conversation with them, and not just in text, but visual, video, and in other forms, audio, etc. You'll feel like you're talking to a real person now. And even sales on the floor, what's going to happen, you go to a mall, you go to Penny's or something like that, and there's people around, sales clerks and checkout cashiers and so forth. That'll be all gone. You'll go to a store with your iPhone, and you'll talk to the salesperson on your iPhone. As soon as you walk in, they'll tell you where to go. You'll take a picture of whatever it is you're buying, and you just walk out. So a lot of retail clerks, in other words, are going to be gone. A lot of customer service reps are going to be gone because of what's called generative AI. This qualitative leap that's occurred here in the past 6 months is called generative AI. It's a qualitatively higher level of machine learning. And further on down the road, I believe before 2030, we will move advances in artificial intelligence will move from generative AI, where machines will make decisions, simple decision making. We will move to what's called AGI, where the machines will decide what decisions to make. Right now in the software, you embed the decisions you want it to make, and the machine becomes more and more efficient as it works, and more productive, therefore, in making that kind of a decision. But it's still limited to the decision that the software programmer puts into the machine. The machine can find ways under generative AI to do its decision-making more efficiently, faster and better and less errors and so forth. It has that power to change its own code. its own initial software code. It can upgrade its own software code in order to make the decision faster, better, less errors, and so forth. But AGI coming means that the machine will not just be limited to decisions and doing it more efficiently, but it will make its own decision, what decisions to process. This is another qualitative leap coming in AI that everyone's kind of worried about. Even some of the original creators of AI are worried about this. But anyway, not only retail clerks and customer service reps, but it's estimated that 20 million jobs in manufacturing will be impacted. Legal, paralegals, you won't need 44%, it's been estimated of all the jobs in the legal industry are going to be automated now because of AI, ChatGPT, preparing documentations, legal docs, research, billing, contract analysis, all of that is going to be replaced by generative AI. Claims adjusters in the insurance industry. In the health industry, consultations will be done not with the doctor and assistants, but with a chat kind of a software. Medical imaging analysis, all the MRIs and so forth will be done by AI. Software development, software engineering, a lot of those jobs will disappear. The simple coding jobs will disappear. You'll be able to do coding by talking to it. You'll tell them you'll tell the machine what you want, and it will write the code for you. You don't have to learn, C+ or Python or R or these languages to write it yourself. You just talk to it, and it will do the writing. Spoken coding, in other words, is coming, or what's called augmented coding. Analysis and the testing of all that will be done by AI. A lot of jobs there. There's a lot of low-level coding jobs, in other words, and quality control of coding that won't be done by software programmers anyway. So we'll need fewer software programmers. Writers, a lot of their content, because it's natural language, is going to be replaced. And that's one of the writer's strikes issue right now. What's going to happen to their jobs with AI? Media production, movies, the same thing. Search engines, why is Bing and Microsoft and Google and especially Google in such a hurry to introduce AI into their search engines? Because it will make multimodal search. In other words, you won't just put keywords in and it'll search. You will talk to it and it'll be visual, it will be audio, it'll be tech. You'll tell it what you want and it will bring up whatever you want. You don't have to input anything, you just speak to it. And that's the next generation of search engines. Mortgage processing, back office work, accounting, human resources. A big application of AI is that businesses are going to implement it to analyze and predict the behavior of their own labor force. In other words, based upon the work of an employee, what's the likelihood that employee is going to leave, right? Or what's the likelihood that employee is going to spend time doing gaming on the job or whatever? That is a big application, and you can see that it's all businesses virtually are going to want to do that, because that means they intensify the productivity of the worker. The privacy of the worker is gone. He's going to be looked at every second by management and the business. I mean, over a century ago, we had time motion studies, right? Which is what was about in manufacturing, to make sure there was no wasted effort to raise productivity, and it did raise productivity. Well, this is time motion study on steroids, or I can't even find a word to intensify it. They're going to be watching you every second and predicting your behavior, and they'll probably, based upon all that data they're getting from you, decide whether to give you a promotion or to lay you off. They'll determine which people are productive and lay off those when layoff time comes, rather than relying on the supervisor's recommendation for a layoff. So analyzing employee predictive behavior is a big application. HR, human resource automation, HR is going away. A lot of marketing jobs are going away. A lot of sales jobs are going away. Now, these aren't jobs where you have robots. I mean, this isn't about an auto plant where you got programmed welding machines, you know, on an assembly line. That's in manufacturing, and it will impact manufacturing, but it's really going to impact these service jobs, these simple decision-making jobs. And that's 80% of the economy in the US. It's mostly services now. Out of 160 million people in the labor force, we have barely 20 million who are making things, manufacturing, construction, and homes, and so forth. The vast majority are service, and 40 million maybe or more of those, probably like 45 million, are already precariat contingent jobs, gig jobs, right? And these are the jobs that are going to simple decision making that are going to be eliminated. And that's why in this recent report that came out by Goldman Sachs here, it concluded that 300 million jobs are going to be either eliminated or the hours of work are going to be significantly reduced for those who still have jobs. There's going to be a massive de-skilling if you still have a job. And the skilled, high-skilled work is increasingly complex, going to be taken on by AI, starting with the very simple jobs, but as AI gets more sophisticated, it will start taking on even more important, complex decision-making. And as I said, when we get to AGI by the end of the decade, then very complex decision-making jobs will be taken over by these software machines. 2/3 of the jobs are exposed, according to last week's Goldman Sachs report. Take a look at that. It's an interesting report, I think. All these studies are showing an intensification. 5 years ago, McKinsey came out a report said 30 million jobs. Now they're saying 300 million jobs because the train has left the station and we've got massive investment going on in AI. The venture capitalists are stumbling over themselves to give money to all these startups that claim to be AI. A lot of them are just bullshit. But some of them will actually, take effect. And Goldman Sachs says this is going to be a productivity boom. Productivity means eliminating jobs. You see, productivity is the same output with fewer workers, right? Or more output with the same workers. That's productivity, very simply put. And if you eliminate jobs and you still have the same output and you got machines doing the decision making, then productivity goes up tremendously. Productivity goes up, profit margins go up, profits go up. Okay, big cost savings, right? There's only 3 ways to improve profits in the business. You either raise prices for what you're selling, you either sell more, or you cut your costs. Well, this is big cost cutting because it's massive layoff time that's coming. And it's not just total jobs being eliminated, but the jobs that remain are going to have fewer hours or less pay. They're going to be less skilled. They're going to be deprofessionalized jobs. The growth of AI envisioned is like 33%, a 33% growth rate, 190 billion investment by 2025. And according to Goldman Sachs, it will impact US GDP. It will add 1 full % to GDP. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you have a $30 trillion GDP by 2030, that's $300 billion a year, just in that year. So if you look at the decade, the amount of investment that's is rising. I think it's like 93 billion last year, but it's going to rise to 300 billion. But that you got to look at the cumulative effect, and you're looking at $1 trillion in the rest of the decade, probably going to be invested in AI. Investing in this case means not R&D, research and development, but it means businesses actually implementing forms of AI, either to behavioral predict its workforce, or to eliminate the customer service and retail jobs, or all of that. And businesses, that train has left the station. They're stumbling over themselves to implement AI. Interestingly enough, Goldman Sachs says that China will be the leader in AI. 26% market share by 2030 will be China. And aside here, that's what the Trump trade war was all about. I've written a number of articles on that. You could probably read them on my blog, but really what precipitated the Trump trade war in March of 2018 was a report by the U.S. trade agency, I forget what it's called, department, in August of 2017 that said China was a threat because its new technology, it was moving in the area of new technologies, cybersecurity, wideband, cloud computing, but especially artificial intelligence. Trump tried to stop using trade and tariffs China from developing, because there are a lot of military implications of AI as well, which I don't get into, right? But it didn't work. In other words, Trump's trade war against China was a big failure. It didn't work. China wasn't going to negotiate any AI change. It wasn't going to slow down AI development. If you look at patents here across the world globally, about almost half of the patents come out of the US and almost half of the other patents come out of China. A lot of these are AI related patents. Europe and the rest of the world is less than 10% of the patents being filed. This is a technology war between China and the US, pure and simple. And whereas Trump's trade war using tariffs failed, Biden is using boycott. He's using sanctions against China and trying to wall it off from access to technology and R&D elsewhere in the world. So the capitalists in the US are still going after China, but it's the worry about technology. And at the core of that is artificial intelligence because of its military implications. Okay, so read that report by Goldman Sachs. Very, very interesting. About 60 or 70 pages here. Now, what is AI? What is AI? We hear a lot of talk about this. Don't think of AI as robots. Don't think of AI as hardware, because that's not its essence. AI is software machines. And it doesn't matter what the hardware form factor that they put it in. The intelligence is in the software. It is software machines that we're talking about here. For the first time, the evolution of machinery per se under capitalism is now taking a software form. Right? And the thing about AI that's significant is that it can change its own code. Right now, it's changing it. It's able to change its own code to be more intelligent for the decision that's been programmed into it. But with AGI, the next qualitative leap, as I said before, it will change its own code to make decisions that weren't initially envisioned by the human programmer inputter, right? That is a higher level of intelligence and code changing. I believe that's going to be here. AGI, is not here yet, but it will be here, I believe, by the end of the decade. Now, to enable generative AI, which is the new qualitative level of AI, to enable it, you need massive databases, massive, and they're located around the world. Internet databases. The difference between machine learning pre-generative AI is machine learning had access to identified databases, usually on the company site or whatever. But with cloud computing now, The software can go anywhere on the internet to any database and draw information from that to make it more intelligent. So massive database, internet database access is a characteristic of generative AI, whereas previous AI could not go, into the cloud wherever it wanted to get its information. Another characteristic of a requirement, you might say, of generative AI or AI, in general, is massive computing power to be able to process instantaneously these huge amounts of data. And that's capable now. You've got new chipsets, semiconductor chipsets that can do this, unlike previously. And then finally, you need advanced customizable statistical software programs. And that's here now. That's here, with programs called Python and R and all the new ones that have been too many being developed on top of that. You can process this to make the decision. You see, it pulls in all this information, processes it in instantaneous time, and makes the decision faster than the human being can make it. And makes, what should we do with this customer? What should we do, with this request? Where do I go to get this? And it does it now in natural language, which opens it up beyond just professional programmers who have to know, what to do, what to put in, and what keywords and so forth. And now it's anybody can write code, simple code, right, by talking to these machines. Okay, so those are the three pre-technology requirements for artificial intelligence, and they are here now. And there's no doubt that they're here, and it makes AI possible now on a widespread level. Okay, instead of specific databases, we have generalized databases. We have human-like output. It talks to you, or it gives you a picture, or it gives you an audio response, or it gives you all the above, multimodal, as they call it, right? Images, audio, natural language, complex questions can be answered. And most importantly, I think, it can generate and change its own code, which means it can self-maintain, especially under AGI. There's no need to maintain these machines. Maybe the hardware, needs to be maintained, but the software doesn't. Once you launch this stuff, the encoding, the human element is not needed, and it becomes more efficient on its own. As it gets more information, it changes its own code so that it can get even more efficient. Well, efficiency is productivity, you see. To do a question, to answer a question faster, more satisfaction of customer, whatever. This ability to rewrite itself, which means to self-maintain itself, is really what's new, I think, about AI. And as it goes further down the road, as I've already said, it will maintain its code, change its code for more complex decisions, which replaces more complex occupational tasks. You see it right now, it's simple decision tasks. The most unskilled workers are going to be first impacted by this, but as it develops further, it will move up the occupation skill chain, and it will displace even more complex labor. Why? Because you don't have to train these people, this machine. It trains itself, right? You don't have to maintain this machine. It works 24/7. There's no benefits, right? There's no overtime pay. There's none of this. Well, that means that the workers who are left are exploited to a degree that's never been achieved before. It increases the exploitation of labor tremendously here. If you look at this in Marxist exploitation terms, right? let me give some background to this. I've been thinking about this for some time. For the last 6 years at St. Mary's College, I've taught a course in which we just read 3 books, right? We read Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. We read Marx's first volume of Capital and some selections in second and third volume. And we read Keynes's General Theory. And we don't read anything. We just read those 3 books in very detail. I've read Marx's volume 1 and selections 6 years in a row. I've read that book 6 times over. And what I'm most impressed about Marx is not the abstract labor value theory, which is hard to quantify, right? How do you quantify value? That was what Marx said was wrong with Smith and Ricardo and others. They couldn't quantify it, right? And of course, Marx's revolution is to quantify value using the proxy of labor time. That's the key to understand Marx's labor theory of value. He does quantify it, value, which is kind of a very amorphous term, and he uses labor time as the proxy, and from there he can get to exploitation in terms of absolute surplus value and relative surplus value. That is I think those chapters on absolute and relative surplus value are the most impressive values in the volume or chapters in Marx's Capital Volume 1. Right? And workers can understand that, you see. And then the question is, does labor create all value? Well, of course it does. Yeah, I believe it does, because if you go back far enough, go to the 16th, 17th century, and you see the beginning of capitalist production for the market, right? Nothing would occur without labor. It's labor that digs up the natural resources, right? It's labor that makes the tools. It's labor that makes the transportation. It's labor that makes the product. It's labor that sells the product, right? So if you trace anything back, everything around us back far enough, you'll find it's labor plus nature, right? Labor and nature. That is the source of all value in goods that are created. Right? But when it hits the marketplace, right, you're not talking about surplus value anymore. You're talking about price, right? When you sell a product in the marketplace, right, you, quote, realize its value to some degree or extent, or you don't realize it, okay, when you sell it, right? Now we're talking about price, not value, right? And now we're talking about price being also influenced by supply and demand rather than the quantity of labor inputted into a product, into a commodity, right? Classic Marxism says that you put labor is the source of value because it wouldn't exist without labor. So somehow there is something in human labor that gives value to goods that enables it to be sold in the market. But once it's sold in the market, then you have price, which takes a role in that sell. So price is partly value determined, but partly also supply and demand determined. Now, Marx was very much in the tradition of classical economics. The conceptual framework is very similar, except Marx makes some very significant enhancements to classical economics, the most important being quantifying with labor time value so that you could measure it, and some other ideas as well. Another idea that Marx gets from classical economics is the idea that capitalism and its productivity eventually slows down. Periodically, typically, it always slows down. There's a boom period of periodic productivity gain, and that productivity then atrophies, Smith observed this, Adam Smith. He called this the steady state, that somehow you observe it slows down. Why does capital go boom and then slow down? Right? Has something to do with productivity, he said, but he never analyzed that or explained that. He just said, well, it appears to be. And then Ricardo comes along and he sees the same thing and he says, oh, that's the stationary state. And it has to do with the collapse of productivity in agriculture that spills over into the relationship with the production of goods in the urban center. So the classical economists observe that somehow capitalism, something in capitalism inherently slows it down periodically. And now Marx picks up that idea and he tries to explain it with the ratio of constant capital to variable capital. And that's what's called the organic composition of capital. You know, the organic composition of capital is really an analysis of productivity and why productivity slows down, right? Now, the reason why it slows down is that the quantity of labor in the product's creation gets less and less, and more fixed capital or constant capital, as he called it, in that ratio increases. The ratio of constant capital to variable labor, in other words, capital declines. And that's why productivity slows down. But if we look at capitalism, especially under neoliberalism, yes, we see that happening. But every time it happens, capitalists come up with some solution to intensifying exploitation and increasing productivity once again. And we saw that, as I've said earlier, with the rise of the changes of, precariat work and so forth, right? And then gig work. And now productivity is slowing down again. And now AI is the answer to that. But this raises a conundrum, I believe, for Marx's concept of the organic composition of capital. And by the way, the falling rate of profit tendency derives from the ratio of organic composition of capital. I'm saying this for you Marxists. Maybe some of you, this is all Greek to you. But part of what I think is important is that the impact of AI is not just the loss of jobs, and it's not just the loss of benefits and the standard of living and all that productivity that's involved, right? But it means that AI will increase the intensification of exploitation of labor, not just job loss, but it will restore productivity to capitalism, which is waning again, right? And in the restoration of that productivity, it intensifies the exploitation of workers who are still there. Right? That's one of my theses and conclusions of this, why AI is so dangerous, right? And AI is the capitalists see this as the solution to their productivity is weakening again. Ever since 2008-9 crash, that's a kind of a threshold. We did not get productivity growth following that, and it was declining, or the rate of increase was very slow. And now, of course, after COVID, it's collapsing, right? The capitalists have to restore productivity, which means restore their profits. And AI is the solution for many of them to cut their costs massively, because cost cutting is a way of increasing profits, right? You either sell more, sell higher, or cut your costs. It's that simple, capitalist production. And AI means massive cost cutting now is about to occur and is occurring. And it means that more and more of the workforce is going to have lower wages. Now you got to understand, wages are what the share of value that the capitalists pay the worker, right? That's his share of the surplus value that he's given. But wages are also determined by the marketplace, by supply and demand. So wages is a concept that is not just value, it's a value concept and it's a market concept. And the same thing applies to profits. Profits are a value concept. In other words, the surplus value that's there that the capitalist keeps, by intensifying productivity and relative surplus value or extending the workday. That's his share. But it's also a market price determined concept and variable. Profits and wages are price determined as well as value determined. Now, Marx in the volume 1 of Capital talks about value production, right? He doesn't get the price yet. He planned 8 volumes of Capital. He writes one, and he's got two volumes of notes that Engels selected and put together, right? And if you go to the Marx Library in Amsterdam, there's a massive amount of stuff that he's written that's never been translated, even into German, okay, and produced and published. So he starts out, looking abstractly in a very Hegelian fashion, going from the very general, planned to go to the particular. He starts with value. He planned to go to price. He never got the price to analyze, although there's some discussion of that in some of volume 2 and 3. He never gets to there, right? So we're stuck in volume 1 with an abstract talk about exploitation based on value, and we try to quantify that value, using labor time. But we're discussing mostly exploitation in the form of value, and value, according to Marx, is produced only by productive labor. Non-productive labor does not produce value. Now, this is a very classical economics concept. I mean, that's exactly what Smith believed as well, right? Smith and Hume and other people before and after him believed labor was the source of all value. These early capitalist economists believed labor was the source of all value. They couldn't quantify it, but they believed it because they saw it. You don't get that interpretation of Smith unless you've read the book, by a bourgeois economist, right? They just focus on supply and demand determined price, right? So they believe that labor was the source of all value as well, but only productive labor. In other words, only labor that produced things or labor that was necessary to transport those things and to sell those things. All other labor, most of the services, did not produce value, according to volume 1 of Capital. Now, that's interesting. And in volume 2 and 3, you get to the organic composition of capital idea and the falling rate of profit tendency, right? Which I don't believe Marx was totally committed to, and which today you can't measure anyway, because profits are a market concept, not just a value concept, and bourgeois data includes profits from financial speculation and all these other sources. And if you're going to use US corporate profits, after-tax profits or EBITDA or whatever, what you're using is profits from financial speculation, which means profits not from productive labor, not from real value. It's mixed in those profits, but a lot of it is not productive labor. So how can you use corporate bourgeois data to prove the falling rate of tendency profit when really you can only use profit from productive labor if you're going to stay with Marx's conceptual framework? You see, that's the problem with a lot of contemporary Marxists who try to prove that falling rate of profit tendency is the driver of business cycles, short-term business cycles. I don't think Marx really was focused on short-term business cycles. Marx is looking at the long-term breakdown of capitalism. It's a long-term analysis. It's a supply-side long-term analysis that capitalism is going to break down over the long run. It's not a business cycle analysis, but you see contemporary Marxists take the falling rate of profit. They look at the rate of profit from one period to another period, and they say, oh, it's weakening. Therefore, what we got is that conceptual idea is really determines capitalist business cycles. No, it doesn't. I don't believe.
So, Jack, what I'd like to do maybe is we'll take a short break, and leave some
Well,
time for
I'm
questions.
almost finished here. Let me just
Oh,
finish
okay.
up in a
Go
couple of
ahead.
minutes, and then we can take
Sure.
a break and do
Go ahead.
Q&A, okay? Because we are running out. Oh, yep, running out of time. Well, you know, let me just sum up, okay? What I've tried to describe here, and I have a print article on this, is that neoliberal capitalism intensifies exploitation in very traditional ways, okay? Extending the workday and intensifying exploitation with productivity, not sharing productivity gains with workers. And we see, you know, the precariat workforce, we see the gig workforce as all symptoms and representations of this and ways that the workday has been extended. But AI is coming along now, and AI is going to play that same role. It's the next iteration of exploitation. But exploitation can be described in value terms, as Marx in Volume 1, or I believe it can be described in market terms. I mean, just the fact that you have all this accumulation of income by investors and capitalists, the 1%, whatever, and you have no wage gains, that means even in a market sense, you've got massive exploitation intensifying. You can look at it in market terms, price terms, you can look at it in value terms. But last point, I don't think the falling rate of profit tendency is quantifiable. There are problems with quantifying profits using capitalist databases. And I don't believe that the organic composition of capital as it's written is sufficient any longer, given software development and software machines, which do not simply, according to Marx, last point, according to Marx's organic composition of capital, machinery is embodied labor, and as it depreciates, it transfers its labor into value into the product. If you got software machines that do not depreciate, but actually can upgrade themselves, self-maintain themselves, then we got to look at AI and software machines. Are these machines or are these labor? And what does it mean for the organic composition of capital in Marxist analysis? I think it has to be revisited given capitalist technology in the 21st century. Okay, well, I kind of jumped around on that, pulling together, you know, what I think needs to be done. Marx is not wrong, but Marx is no longer, his labor theory value is no longer sufficient, I believe, to describe 21st century capital exploitation.
Okay, so what we're going to do right now is take a short break for announcements. I want to remind everybody that you can ask questions during this next half-hour period by raising your hand through the reactions button on the lower part of your screen. We'll try to take everybody. We'll keep questions limited to 2 minutes and go from there. But let me go ahead and make some announcements about upcoming programs. Next week, we have a very important program. I want to urge everybody to strongly consider attending and finding out about what's going on. Hands Off Uhuru. Many of you heard in July of 2022, the FBI launched a military assault on a community-based, an African-American community-based organization, the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru Movement, and arrested a group of members. And recently, the federal government has turned up indictments against the Uhuru Movement and the African People's Socialist Party for some very vague charges related to sowing discord here in the United States on behalf of Russia. This is a very, very important, significant move on the part of the government, an attack on an African-American community-based organization, and an attack on the left in general. We want to really encourage people to come next week and find out. We're fortunate to have two speakers for this session next week. The first one is Mweze Odom, who is the chair of the Hands Off Uhuru Committee and a member of the African People's Socialist Party, and also Penny Hess, who is the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee and is one of the 3 people who have been indicted on felony charges by the federal government. So do come next week at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time and sign up for our email notification list at ICSSmarks.org to receive notifications of future programs and to receive a Zoom link for the program. Following that, on May 28th, we tentatively have a presentation by Rick Sterling, who has been touring the Donbass and Crimea areas of Russia. We're going to get a report back, an on-the-ground report back from what's going on in Russia related to the war in Ukraine. And finally, on June 4th, we're going to have a program with Greg Godels will be speaking on the world economy, the economic situation, trouble ahead for the world economy. Greg is a Marxist blogger, and he's also spoken here at the library many times. Want to encourage people to tune in for that. So with that, what we're going to do is, oh, by the way, you can also go to our website and see how you can donate to support our activities. There's a donate information on the website. There's a contact form to contact us. And again, you can sign up for our email notification list at the website. So from here, what I'd like to do is hold on a second. Okay. To ask people to bring up their questions for Professor Rasmus. And I'm going to start with Doyle and Jan, and then I'm going to go to Raj and then to Janet. So Doyle, if you would unmute yourself and ask your question, we appreciate it. Thank you.
So I just wanted to thank Dr. Erasmus. He's doing really important work. So I have 2 questions. The first one is, what does Dr. Erasmus think about the industry raising the dangers of AI and safety and ethics? That's what they claim. And that's what the danger of AI is, as they see it. The second question is, what sort of role can the government interventions play in the question about AI?
Yeah, well, I think AI train has left the station, and there's so much profit to be made from it that the regulation is pretty much just a lot of talk. And to some extent, some of the, recently Elon Musk and some of the others came out and, raised a question of some of the threat. I don't know how much that is to slow down Microsoft and OpenAI and the leaders so they can jump back in. They meaning Musk and others. There's probably some of that element there. But I mean, when you get to AGI, you've got some, even now with generative AI, you got some real ethical issues here. In other words, even now, a deep fake, creating visuals on the internet of people who are saying things who aren't really the people who are saying those things, right? You can just think of what that means politically for campaigns and for politics. And we have a lot of falsification going on the internet, lies and so forth. Well, this is going to raise it to another level, a threshold here. You won't know what's true and what isn't, and who is true and who isn't. Are you talking to a real person or not? So politically and socially, it can be very, very disruptive. I mean, we've seen social media being very disruptive, which means technology, capitalist technology, is in the process of undermining its own political system in some ways, I believe. but the capitalists go for it because it means profits, which is more important than the remnants of democracy that may exist. But I think it's a real threat here for the social structure and for the political system itself, should it occur. And I don't see regulation in any way, shape, or form really coming out of this. There's just talk right now, and it's moving so fast, you see, because there's so much money being thrown at the investment side of this, hundreds of billions of dollars already, that the regulators can't keep up with it. And also, there's so much money to be made, and where there is, capitalists make sure the regulations don't interfere with that money to be made.
Okay, next up, and I do want to urge everybody to keep your questions brief because we have quite a few people have questions. Let's go to Raj, then Janet, and then Roger Harris, and then Richard Wright. So Raj, if you would unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Jack. Thank you very much. I enjoyed both, learned both from both your lectures. On this one, I will have some issues about your statement on Marx. First of all, on productivity that you say is cyclical. In other words, whenever there is a business cycle, that is because of loss of productivity. Actually, it is profit rate that goes down. And
Can you talk a little louder, Raj? You're a little soft.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that it is the profit rate that goes up and down, and that business cycle is associated with that, not the productivity. Productivity generally rises in capitalist system, barring some very unusual thing like a great war or something. Productivity continues to rise for the same simple reason that capitalists want to reduce the amount of human labor in the commodity they produce, in the individual commodity. So that's one thing which I think I would like you to kind of react to. So where profit is S over C plus V, exploitation rate is related to productivity. Okay, so that's one thing I think you vary somewhat from Marx, unless I misunderstand it. So if you can clarify it. The second thing is about value. Now, value, as you know, is two types, use value and exchange value. And use value is produced by nature too. If you have a tree, in some places, you can just go pluck a fruit and eat it. So it's giving you use value. Nature takes care of the tree. I mean, there are places like that. So it is the exchange value. And exchange value is where labor is involved, where laborer does not get paid for all his work, from which the profit is derived. Now, this is fundamental to Marx. If one doesn't believe in it, you're not a Marxist. Then
Raj, that's 2 minutes, so please go ahead.
And the third one is, I think there is some confusion there, in at least my understanding. Third one is, you said financial profits are coming out of nowhere, but no, I think they are coming from the transfer of actual work performed by people. That's averaging of profit rate, if you've studied volume second of capital. So these are 3 points where I thought you were somewhat varying from Marx. If you could respond, or maybe I misunderstood, please clarify. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to understand your point. 3 points. My point on profits is that if you look at business today, a lot of their bottom line in terms of profits is what's called portfolio profits. In other words, financial profits generated without the use of labor. When you create all these derivatives and even stock and other financial assets, and you make profits out of just driving up the price of a creation of a financial asset, that's not creating any value, right? There's no productive labor that creates the value of a derivative, a credit default swap or whatever. This is just something that the capitalists create. They create markets and they speculate in it. They bet, they play games with it, and they make money off of it, or they don't make money off of it. Well, but if you look at large corporations today, about a third of their total profits are from financial asset portfolio profits. Now, if you take that figure that is represented in the government statistics on corporate profits, right? And most or a third of it is financial asset, in other words, creating money out of money, not out of labor, right? Then you got a distorted variable called profits. And you cannot use that variable, in my opinion, to explain the Marx's analysis, because Marx's analysis of profits is limited to productive labor, right? Value becomes surplus, value becomes profits, right? But if the profits data sources you're using are from capitalist sources, and they include financial asset portfolio, and by the way, profits are also defined differently in different countries. And capitalism is a global system. If you're talking about profits, you've got to aggregate global profits if you want to talk about falling rate of profit. And you cannot do that. You cannot get global data on profits for capitalism. It just does not exist. Plus, the definitions are different. Plus, there's another problem too. If you're just going to use from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis corporate profits, this is for corporations, profits for corporations. Corporations are capitalists, of course, but you have this other big category called business income. This is non-corporate business, non-corporate capitalists. And when people try to use corporate data to prove the falling rate of profit, they ignore business income, which is a form of capitalist profits as well. You got to integrate that. Now that all raises other problems, and that is 65%, according to the US government, of business income is wages, right? So you've got to somehow shake out 65%. This is how, well, I won't get to that, but the bottom line is corporate data or data on profits is not usable to describe a falling rate of profit thesis. It's not usual, it's corrupted. Capitalist profit data is corrupted, and you cannot use it, I believe, for data gathering and definitional and other reasons. And that's my big issue with the falling rate of profit tendency. The other issue is productivity, right? If, as Marx said, that machinery simply imparts its value into the product and depreciates at some point, when it's fully depreciated, it no longer has any value to put into the product, to convey. Labor puts its product, its value in when it makes the product. Machinery that it uses depreciates, and in that process adds value into the product. But if you've got software machinery that does not depreciate, that actually appreciates because it can rewrite its own code, become more productive and efficient, well, then what does that mean for the organic composition of capital argument, the relationship between constant capital and variable capital labor? Okay, what does it mean? Is that ratio now not going to decline with AI? Is that ratio going to move in the other direction? These are questions that have to be answered, I think, if you really want to apply the labor theory of value in the 21st century. As far as productivity is concerned, it's very clear in the US that we have a long run decline of productivity. Capitalism, US capitalism has a problem with productivity. And yes, there are swings in productivity as you have business cycles. Business cycles, you lay people off, so productivity rises at a certain point because you got fewer people producing goods, right? And then business cycle, you got a short run cyclical variation in productivity too. But the long run trend is also, overlaid on this, and it's very clear productivity is slowing, and now in the last year and a half, declining dramatically. that's why I believe also that Biden has thrown out these 3 bills, these 3 acts, which are really taking money from COVID spending and trying to boost productivity in the U.S. Both the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a misnomer, and the Chip and Manufacturing Act, and before that, the Jobs Act. Those are all investment acts. They're trying to get investment back up, but it's still declining. So there's a problem of capitalist productivity decline. And of course, if it's declining, well, then the profitability is declining because productivity is cost reduction. Cost reduction is a form of boosting profits. I hope that answered your questions. I wasn't too.
I think
clear what
we can do a separate session on some of these things. Let's go ahead and I'm going to ask Janet to unmute yourself, ask your question, followed by Roger, Richard, Kit, and let's try to keep the questions to 2 minutes because we only have a few more minutes left. So Janet, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I have 2 questions. The first one is maybe silly. I don't know. Anyway, do you think the ultimate goal of the ruling class is to totally eliminate the proletariat through various means, elimination of jobs, benefits, social welfare programs, death from pandemics and wars, and replace it with AI and robotics to serve themselves, the only human beings left? So that's one. The other one is, do you think there's a possibility that the trend you described could be sabotaged? In other words, is there a way that this can be stopped?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think the capitalists totally want to get rid of labor. They want to exploit it more because who's going to buy their stuff? If you get rid of labor, I believe that as AI intensifies and becomes more complex and replaces more jobs, the capitalists are going to have to face the reality of some kind of a guaranteed annual income because if you impoverish people to such an extent, and I tell you, most of the Gen X and millennials are really under great stress. They're just not making income to have a normal life, and they're very, very discontent about it. And that's why, like 2/3 of them say they want socialism. They don't know what that means. It just means not the existing system. So they can't push it too far, right? But they, in the short run, an individual capitalist, he's going to push it as much as he can. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about the social implications of this and whether people have money. He's just to survive. He's just thinking of how much profit can I make in the short run to satisfy my shareholders. That's all he cares about. So individually, they will press it to a point that if they could replace all their labor, they would. But socially, they cannot do that. As far as sabotaging it, I don't see right now, given the arrangement of class relations we have in this country today and the capitalist state increasingly, intensely aiding capitalists because of global competition, if nothing else, I don't see how you can stop it, at this particular point. It will create a great discontent. Already people are getting increasingly worried about technology and its rate and pace of change and what it's doing to social relations and political relations. They're already becoming aware of that and becoming almost anti-technology. And that's going to really intensify. That anti-technology development is going to really intensify because technology in the hands of the capitalists is making them, filthy rich. But it's really destroying the lives and the standard of living of most people, or more and more people, I would say. So this division, technology is not really serving the people, but it's really serving capitalist exploitation and restoring capitalist income and wealth.
Okay, Roger, we only have time for a couple more questions, so we'll go to Roger, followed by Richard. So Roger, please go ahead.
Alan,
thank you.
I can go another 10 minutes after 12, so we can.
Oh, okay. Thank you. The list is growing and growing.
Yeah.
Roger, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. It's been a very informative presentation. Gives us a lot to think about. I want to make a comment, which you might want to respond to, and then actually make an actual question. The first one, the comment, it relates to Janet's comment about surplus population, and that even before AI hit the global north, the agricultural revolution hit the global south. And Samir Amin wrote about that, excuse me, where he spoke about today, average industrial agriculture is about 1,000 to 10,000 times more efficient than traditional peasant labor. And that means that the vast majority of the people in the world that are tied to the land have really become surplus labor, that they no longer are needed to create the agricultural produce that was previously produced by peasant labor. So you might want to comment on that. But my question has to do with AI particularly. And before there was AI, there was, of course, there was, robotics and stuff like that. And all those things under capitalism are terrible for the working class. They result in the increased exploitation of the working class. But under socialism, those very innovations free the working class from the drudgery of labor and allow more time for productive leisure, not productive, but self-fulfilling leisure work. My question is, you've discussed AI under a capitalist economic regime. What would be the impact of AI under socialism?
Yeah, well, that's kind of speculative. Depends what kind of socialism you're talking about, I guess. But if it were socialist, it would have to be concerned about the social impacts of this technology and who would it actually be benefiting. Right now, the benefit of AI is going, as in all productivity in the last 40 years, gains is attributing to the capitalists, right? They're going to reduce their costs, they're going to increase their profits, right? And they're going to get wealthier. And I would presume under socialism, what are we going to do about those jobs that are going to be lost? Is some of those profits going to go back into retraining people? Instead of to shareholders, is the question. Retraining people for new jobs and improving other aspects of the quality of life. The wealth generated by AI would be, under socialism, would be redistributed back to society instead of being paid to just the shareholders. I mean, look at the last 12 years in the US here. In terms of just the Fortune 500 companies, how much has been redistributed by just corporations, Fortune 500, to their shareholders in the form of stock buybacks and dividend payouts? $15 trillion, just Fortune 500 companies since 2009 has been given to shareholders in the form of stock buybacks and dividend payouts. Under Trump, it was like 1.3 trillion a year for every year until, of course, 2020 hit, and now it's going back up again. So it would be forms of redistributing that back to benefit the standard of living and the quality of life for the rest of society. And then, of course, there would have to be some very serious regulations on the impact it's having socially and politically under socialism, because it's AI is going to undermine, technology is undermining even limited capitalist democracy in a very serious way right now.
Okay, next is Richard, followed by Kit, and then Rich Johnson. Richard, and try to keep it to 2 minutes.
I'll try. Jack, let me say I've been a fan of yours for about 40 or 50 years now, and so it's a real pleasure to talk with you.
You know me that long.
back in the early days of Z Magazine. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And out of the crew here, I cut my teeth on Brandon Squeezy's theory of capitalist development. I've got a copy of Adam Smith's on my iBook that I'm trying to go through. And also, I graduated from the University of Oregon, where I in fact I took part in AI stuff, doing Lisp and doing artificial symbolic mathematic processing. So I've been familiar with this stuff for a very, very, very long time. And I think you made the Terminator version of AI, which I would love to get into. But my question is, and I think you really make the point here, is that we really need to get back to organizing. We need to, that the whole point of this is, I think as Roger made point of, is that it comes back down to how do we distribute the fruits of this economic development. And we've gotten away from organizing and fighting for that distribution. So could you address the question of how we get off the campuses, how we get into the communities, and how do we really live up to Marx's 11th thesis on Feuerbach? Thank you.
Okay. I'm glad you brought up the Sweezy reference here, because one thing I did not talk about, I missed, that I want to just say a comment about, is that under neoliberalism, we have an increasing exploitation, workday and intensification, productivity, but we also have a growth of what Marx just generally briefly talked about in volume 2 called secondary exploitation. And Sweezy brought this up. What is secondary exploitation? Secondary exploitation is when workers are paid a wage, which is a subset of the value they create. Capitalists keep most of the value, and that turns out into profits. But workers are given a share of that. That's called the wage, right? But with secondary exploitation, what's occurring increasingly is the capitalists are finding ways of taking back that wage or parts of that wage after they pay it. And if value is embedded in the wage, they're secondarily taking back some of the value that they paid workers in the wage. And of course, wage theft is a good example of that, how that's done. Being done, but indebting workers, is another example of that. The working class is deeply in debt. And what is debt? Debt is really interest, which is a claim on future wages, right? They're claiming your future wages in the form of interest even before you get those wages. That's a form of secondary exploitation. They're taking back wages and value that they already gave you, your share. They've taken it back. There's a lot more of that going on in capitalism under neoliberalism. Okay, and as far as how do you organize against this? I agree with you. But it all comes down in my mind to the organization question, which is the only and the big question here in the U.S. and the West, and that is there's no organization for workers and working class to fight. And they know it. And so in most cases, they don't fight, or they erupt in these big demonstrations, like yellow vests and against the pension plan in France and so forth. And capitalists just stonewall them, their government, and they wait it out until they atrophy. And these eruptions will always dissipate without an organization. And that's the big problem. We got no organization that expresses to people an alternative vision and an alternative strategy and plan to reach that vision. So there's no place for them to go to. We've got workers, but unions, but the unions have declined significantly. And in the US, they are just an appendage of the Democrat Party. in most cases. So the workers are atrophied and marginalized, and they know it. You know, workers aren't stupid. They're not going to go jump out and fight unless they have some confidence in the organization they're going to fight with. But there is no organization in the U.S. That's the number one question, I believe.
Okay, next is Kit, followed by Rich Johnson, and then David Campbell. Go ahead, Kit, please.
Hi, yeah, thank you for speaking on this topic, Jack. I really appreciate the information
Talk a little
that you have
louder, please.
for us.
A little louder.
Rich, please lower
And
your cell phone
We need
volume.
to, we have a speaker in the background. It's echoing. If you could
Yeah,
cut off the
hi. So,
speaker.
thank you for speaking about this topic, Jack. I think it's very timely. A lot has been on the media regarding this. I think there's a kind of a push to consider the ethics of it, but I tend to agree with you. It's not going to go very far because the rate of profits by the capitalists is going to beat the ethics at this point. And I agree, the train has left the station. The working class has missed the train. They're not quite aware of it. I don't think they can stop it. And even getting on the tracks, I think a lot of people will be lost in the process of this issue. Anyway, a lot of the questions I had have already been asked and answered, but so I'm gonna just ask a couple of comments. There was a well-known writer that talked about the hallucination of the people who are creating AI. And also, do you think we are looking at a Terminator, Soylent Green scenario in the future? And can AI solve the problems of global climate change? Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't hear everything you said, but let me kind of guess. AI is not going to solve problems for most folks. They're the problems of the economy today, and the social structure in trouble, and the political system in trouble. I don't see AI as a solution to that. And those who are pressing it don't really care about that. I worked in technology for 20 years at sort of senior levels. And, these people, when they create something, they see big dollar signs. And that's what they're after. They want to go public. They want to get big stock options, all these startups and so forth. And the big companies, like Microsoft and Google, they see this as the next iteration of their control of the growth area of capitalism. So I don't. The people who are driving this are not normal people, as one of my relatives says, it's the evil four, evil four, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, or Meta, whatever you want to call them, and Amazon. This group is driving technology so fast and is disrupting society and political relations and social relations, but they don't care because there's incredible wealth that's being created.
Okay, Rich, followed by David Campbell. So Rich, if you would unmute yourself and ask your question. Rich, go ahead. We can hear you.
So I'm sorry, I'm learning something new. Yeah, I'm coming. Oop. Sorry. Oh crap.
Okay, let me
just sit down. Kathy.
Okay, I'm going to mute Rich, and we're going to go ahead to David. We'll come back to you, Rich. Okay. So David, if you would go ahead and ask your question, please.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Erasmus. Of the many concerns regarding AI, one I have, and I'm not sure if I've heard addressed, is it seems like with all of this advanced messaging about AI, about be afraid, be very afraid, as we should be, it also seems like it gives them an easy, employers an easy out to dismiss labor employment in the future, just blaming it on AI when maybe it wasn't AI. It was poor budgeting, poor planning, something else that they blame on AI, but because we've been led to believe that AI will control everything in the future, all they have to do is call it that and make it so. I'm wondering in that regard, is there any way that if we were to lose employment in the future due to AI, could we confirm it? I want to see the server farm. I want to see my job description that was outsourced to AI. Is there any way to sort of forensically get at that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, that's all part of capitalist ideology, spinning AI, for example, and it's going to do all these great things. And you're going to hear a lot of that. And one thing you're going to hear a lot about is, technology will create as many jobs as it destroys. And they'll point to the early industrialization of the US, and they'll point to the fact that we've lost all these farm jobs, but we gained all these industry jobs and so forth, right? And they'll use that as an example and claim that, there'll be all these new jobs created. Well, these new jobs created are going to be highly skilled jobs. In other words, you're going to be data scientists of some kind, right? Which requires a lot of education. Highly skilled, but the jobs are going to be lost are low skilled. And what are those low skilled people going to do is the question. Right now they're struggling in precarious jobs, low paid service jobs, 2 or 3 of them doing gig and whatever, they're struggling along. Gen Z, most of Gen Z and millennials are in terrible shape in this country. They can't have normal families. They don't have a normal job. The income is too low. They don't have any benefits. They are very discontent. And we're going to have more of them. The point is, what does this mean? It means a lot more social unrest, I think. And the ideology that justifies technology, technology is going to do so much for us and so on. It's a lot of it's pie in the sky, I believe. It doesn't matter what it can do for you when you don't have a job or you have a low paid job you can't survive on. Who cares, right? But you'll hear a lot of this spin going on, and particularly you'll hear, it's going to create a lot more jobs, but then you'll see it won't. I really believe it won't, because it requires highly skilled, and far more people are going to lose hours of work, not just total employment, but hours of work. And when that happens, you got all this excess labor supply, which is going to drive down wages even more. So I don't see a very positive development from all this technology is beginning to run amok. I was in technology for 20 years, but I'm very critical of it. I don't like where it's going in terms of its impact on people. It does a lot in terms of, new medicine and, new machinery and so forth. But what are the negative impacts of this? And of course, in the next decade, we're going to see tremendous negative impacts on the political system, political relations.
Great, good points. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, last couple of people up here. Let's go with Gene. Please keep your question short and go ahead. Unmute yourself, Gene. There you go.
Hey, I'm on, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This was a great discussion and presentation, and thank you for this. I guess I have a comment. I do lead a kind of sheltered life since I've retired with a good union pension and own my own house and all that. So many of these things I don't worry about. But the comment I wanted to make is that Marx, towards the end of his life, after he finished volume 1 of Capital, he turned to the study of anthropology. And one of the things that he used the work of Lewis Henry Morgan, and this was transformed by, his notes were transformed by Engels into The Origin of the Family, Private Property and the State, which goes into the same prediction about the growth of property, and that it's turned into an alien force, which is, but this is not going to be endpoint. The endpoint is going to be a return to basically a socialist revolution. But I just want to make this point, and I wonder if you have any thoughts on the work of Engels and Marx on anthropology. Thank you.
Well, not really. I can't add too much on the anthropology analysis of Marx. But basically, you know, I will say that to me, in my reading 6 years in a row, that of Marx, that Marx is a long run analysis, the breakdown of capitalism, right? In the long run, it will break down. It's not a business cycle analysis. And by the way, none of classical economics was business cycle. Marx is the epitome of classical economics. You can't take classical economics as conceptual framework any further than Marx took it. You have to create a new conceptual framework. And I think that's why the capitalists abandoned classical economics and developed the neoclassical economics in answer to Marx to pretty much ignore the whole idea of the labor theory of value. That was the whole idea of saying that value is just price. It's just supply and demand. And that's where economics has gone ever since, 1870s and after. Of course, Marx's analysis of the breakdown wouldn't be guaranteed and absolute that at some point the working class would have to get organized politically and economically, and it would have to overthrow capitalism. Capitalism will always regenerate a recovery without an opposition, you see. It would be more impoverished maybe. And the other comment I want to make is that exploitation does not mean immiseration and poverty. You see, you can have, in Marxist analysis, you can have rising wages and even faster rising exploitation. It doesn't mean that workers are going to get so poor that they can't survive. It's just going to mean that they're going to produce more value, and the capitalists are going to keep more of that value, and maybe even their wages will rise a little. But what we've seen here under neoliberalism is that wages aren't rising. Real wages are actually declining, and especially if you look at these recent generations, Gen Zers and millennials, they're going backwards, no doubt about it. On the other hand, those at the very, very top 5-10% occupations are doing very well under capitalism. Their wages are rising. Oh, why? Because they are productive, because capitalism needs them for AI, but it doesn't need simple decision-making folks anymore. And it's going to get rid of them, and it's going to leave it up to the government to deal with the instability that's going to create.
Okay, last question, Sharon, if you would unmute yourself and ask your question, and then we've got to let Jack go. So Sharon, please go ahead.
Thank you. At the end here, I think it's important to come back to the concerns or the questions that was touched on by a number of people, including Janet and Roger. What does AI do under socialism? How does it serve the people? How could it serve the people? Because I think that the answer is very well. So AI does have a few benefits. For example, they've taught AI to read mammograms, and AI can find problems that are missed by radiologists. And in the whole field of medicine, AI has great potential. Mm-hmm. As well, the population of China is decreasing at an enormous rate, and that's not going to be changed, in my opinion. By the end of this century, there will be there will be about 800 million people in China instead of 1.4 billion. And what does that mean? It means that in certain areas, there will be a lack of working people, especially in agriculture. And that can be picked up by AI in some very important, as yet unexplored ways, in my opinion. And under socialism, we will have guaranteed annual income, guaranteed healthcare, guaranteed education, etc. And that will not be dependent on whether or not, how much a worker is earning in order to pay for those things for themselves, because it will be a social benefit of living in a socialist society. So I think we need to look at and emphasize what could be a great boon to humanity if under the right social relations. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I agree. You know, there are many applications of AI which improve the life, which will improve our lives, even under capitalism. You know, I'm not saying that it's terrible in all its iterations. Yeah, there will be a lot of benefits from technology, AI technology. You mentioned, you know, just in the healthcare sector, no doubt. But what I'm focusing on is the cost of that in terms of job destruction, right? And in terms of that, in terms of wage compression, and in terms of productivity increase that's not shared with workers, and what happens to all these people who are unemployed or grossly underemployed. That is the focus of what I'm talking about. And in no way I'm saying all technology and AI in particular is going to be negative. As far as the question, you know, under socialism, yeah, it wouldn't be socialism if it didn't do that, right? If it didn't redistribute the wealth created by technology and share that wealth throughout society, then it wouldn't by definition be socialism. But then we come down to the question of how do you get to socialism? And that is the number one question, you know, in the US, the organization question, which is so undeveloped. You know, I'm not very optimistic given that level. What you see is a few intellectuals here trying to create a new party from the top down. You know, I don't believe in that at all. And you see a lot of movements, single issue movements everywhere that can't come together, that don't come together. And you see the labor movement, which should be leading this, tied to the apron strings of the Democrat Party, the leaders, they're not going to change. So the outlook of the vehicle for changing this and making sure that technology and AI benefits everybody, that solution is almost non-existent in my opinion here. So how do we then mitigate the terrible effects of job loss that are coming is the question.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack, for your presentation. We could probably do 5 sessions on all the topics that came up today. I want to thank all the participants and invite everybody to join us next week and in the future for future programs. Again, thank you, Jack. And if you need to reach us, go to ICSSmarks.org. So let's go ahead and
let me also just announce, people want to follow my writing and what I'm talking about in this and other areas. My blog, jackrasmus.com, is the best place, or day to day, follow me on Twitter at drjackrasmus here. So, you know, I'm talking about these and related topics, you know, pretty much constantly. And I believe this will be a YouTube presentation at some point, and I will post that on jackrasmus.com. And as I said at the beginning, I am writing a print article that gives you more time to flesh out some of the issues other than just, you know, verbally throwing a lot of these ideas out, which may lead to misunderstandings.
Very good. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and stop the recording right now. And happy Mother's Day to everybody. We'll see you guys.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Nebo Proctor Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses, since we can no longer pass the hat at our in-person forums. Please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, @yahoo.com. and the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.